We're currently mining on a global basis 10 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. And that's a shocking number. So, how can you possibly trade at 80 to 1 and be mining at 10 to 1? That relationship cannot last. I think we'll see triple digit silver over the next couple of years for sure. It's my thesis, and I'm pretty certain we're going to see it.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm very happy to have on the line, I should say back on the line, Keith Neumeyer. He's the CEO of First Majestic Silver and the chairman of First Mining Finance, a new gold company that acquired 5 gold companies in 2015 alone. And of course, investors in that company include Doug Casey, Eric Sprott, Marin Katusa, and Rick Rule. And Keith himself has been accumulating millions of shares on the open market since last year. Hey Keith, before we begin, I have to congratulate you on an outstanding start to 2016. AG, your company First Majestic Silver, look at that 3-month chart from $2.50 to $6.40. Holy cow, how does that feel?
Wow, considering it used to be $26 a share, I guess it is good, obviously, and it just goes to show you, there's just such a pent up demand for mining stocks, and they're so under owned, and you just need a very small move in the metal price and a little bit of change in sentiment, and all of a sudden, people just pile into this market, and these stocks just go crazy, and that's what's happening, and it's very exciting to see, and I'm looking for, obviously better things as the year progresses.
Yes, of course, the precious metal stocks are all down from their highs that we saw years ago, but they're starting to recover. And I want to ask you, what's the move telling us? Because my friend Jeff Nielsen over at Bullion Bulls has been writing about this fake rally because he says gold has been leading the way. And everyone knows in a real bull market, silver always leads the way higher. What are these stock prices telling us? Clearly, Wall Street insiders must feel differently than Jeff Nielsen does.
Yeah, this is different, definitely different. There's a saying that goes on in the mining sector, the death of the PDAC, and the PDAC is the largest retail mining conference in the world. It takes place the first week of March every year, and the mining stocks generally top at that time, and then it's basically March, April, May, June is kind of a difficult period. We see metal prices usually coming off a little bit, share prices coming off a little bit, and then July and August things turn around. It's pretty seasonal. Like you could look at seasonal charts going back 30 years, and it's really amazing. It's to the T. But this year there's a complete different sentiment going on. As you know, I'm in Hong Kong right now, and this whole talk about negative interest rates and what the Fed is doing. The fact that the Fed increased rates back in December, and gold went up as a result, and the dollar went down. That was reverse of what everyone was thinking was going to happen, and those things combined, I think that the Fed is losing credibility. Into talk of negative interest rates. People are looking at gold now as the place to as a safe haven, to be as a protection against these major forces that are occurring currently in the world.
Well, let's talk about the Fed and negative interest rates. As I've noted with my friend Andy Hoffman over at Miles Franklin, negative interest rates is the theft of the savings of people around the world. And not long ago in an interview, Andy admitted that he had never even imagined something as sinister as negative interest rates. It had never even crossed his mind, and of course he's well versed in the crimes of the central banks. He knows all about the Federal Reserve. He knows all about inflation and hyperinflation. But not even Andy Hoffman had ever imagined that these people would be as sinister as rolling out negative interest rates. Is that something that shocks you too?
Oh, it is. Yeah, and you're right. It is a theft. It's a way the governments are trying to tax the people, and it's going to start with big corporations that have a lot of cash sitting around in their banks, and then it's going to trickle down to the average person on the street, and the people that get hurt are the small investor, the people that can the least afford it, the retired people who rely on uh, interest on their savings that they've expected to have upon retirement. And this is all changing. The world is changing. I think there's going to be a major revolt. I think if we actually do see negative interest rates in North America, I think we're going to see riots.
Yeah, well, we should see riots. We should see people finally reach the boiling point. I've been talking about that with my guests too. It seems like the middle class is being boiled alive by this banking cartel, by this insidious inflation, and by this money printing. It's the only card in the deck that the central banks and central planners have left to play, right? It's hyperinflation of the currency. Are you surprised we haven't seen hyperinflation in the dollar yet, which is what John Williams at Shadow Stats has been predicting? For probably 5, 6 years, he's been predicting 2016 would be the year we'd see hyperinflation. Are you surprised it hasn't reared its ugly head yet? And if not this year, when?
Well, it's a very interesting, to see what's going to happen. But the governments around the world are chasing or trying to push their currencies lower, in an effort to push, inflation or onto other, or deflation, pardon me, push deflation onto other countries and try to inflate their own, um, uh, systems, and it's not working, obviously. And I think a lot of it's got to do with demographics. Uh, we do have an aging population, and I think it's also just simply got to do with the amount of debt. We've got to a point now where the debt is just so big that it's just unserviced, can't be serviced. And because it's so large, it's also creating, deflation, because it's taking away, the engine that was there, over the last, couple of decades of growth, because there's just no way to grow anymore or more, because you just can't take on any more debt. And then, we've lived in a world where, we've basically built our economies on a global basis on debt, on borrowing money.
Yeah, and pushing $20 trillion in stated debt. Of course, the unfunded liabilities are well north of $100 trillion. And then, if we want to start talking about derivatives, it really gets scary as we see these big international banks start to topple. Banks like Deutsche Bank, J.P. Morgan has had its share of struggles. Let me ask you this: you're in Hong Kong right now. You know the sentiment as it pertains to precious metals in the United States. Most people that you know, that I know, most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues don't own physical gold or physical silver. Most have never even held one of those coins in their hands. The sentiment around the world, though, is far different, especially in cultures that have always embraced precious metals as real wealth. What is the sentiment like in Hong Kong? Can you give us a little insight?
Well, there's definitely a lot of interest. We're seeing, we're seeing state mining companies over here starting to go on the acquisition spree. Looking around the world for gold mines to buy. They're very bottom up players. And they're very long term players. So a lot of the people we're talking to are, actually looking to buy gold mines. And then, of course, there's the institutional investor and the retail investor who wants to have the physical gold. And it's quite amazing. I was walking down the street just the other day, 2 days ago, and these jewelry stores that the windows have just covered in gold jewelry, and this is big pieces of jewelry, and very expensive, obviously, as well. But you're seeing bracelets and necklaces that are 10 ounces of gold and 20 ounces of gold, and these are very heavy pieces of jewelry, and they're very ornamental. I can't imagine people would actually wear these things, but the fact that the Chinese want to have this type of physical, they like to have the coins, but it's also very much in their culture. So it's like the Indians as well. They want to have ornamental gold. They want to have gold, sitting on their shelf in their home, in the form of a vase, or they want to have jewelry in the form of gold, and so on and so forth. So it's very different than North America, for sure.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about Silver Eagle sales then, because we had another record year in 2015, and 2016 is off to a heck of a start. And according to our friend SRS Rocco, Silver Eagle sales will likely jump by 25% again in the first quarter of 2016. And that puts us on track for another very big record. So let me ask you this. Keith, you famously challenged other silver producers to withhold production to try to crush the manipulation by the cartel. So the question is this: due to the physical demand we're seeing, as exemplified by the Silver Eagle sales, shouldn't we see the paper price be overwhelmed here at some point?
Well, it is very frustrating, and I actually, had a discussion with a number of CEOs of a few of the silver companies just a month ago, and again, I I try to convince them of their importance to hold back some of our production, but for whatever reason, I've just not been able to, convince other silver companies to do it. And but nevertheless, look, I'm a believer in the market. I think ultimately, we go through phases where we have imperfection, and that's one of the areas now where we have a price fixing mechanism in metals that is very inefficient. It's very damaging to the miners. It's damaging for investors who believe the metal should be at higher prices, and as long as the regulators allow the banks to sell unlimited amounts of paper, silver, and gold as well. I'm not sure if the system can ever be fixed on its own. What I think is going to happen is that there's just going to simply be a physical shortage of metal. We're consuming more silver today than we ever have as a human race, and it's the use of silver is climbing each year. We've seen production in 2015 drop from 2014 on silver. It looks like 2016 is going to be another year of lower silver production as well. Silver is a very, very rare metal, and people don't understand it. We're currently mining on a global basis 10 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold.
Right.
And that's a shocking number.
Mm-hmm.
You look at what we're trading at 80 to 1. So how can you possibly trade at 80 to 1 and be mining at 10 to 1? That relationship cannot last. And we're going to have a situation where there'll be big electronics company or a big automotive company or solar panel company, you name it. They're going to have to slow down their production of their product because they can't get silver. And I'm confident that's going to happen. And that's what's going to break the system. The regulators and the banks, the regulators are sitting on their hands. The banks are making too much money. There's no incentive for them to change the system, but it will be a supply squeeze that will eventually change the system.
Yeah, there is no incentive for them to change the system except for the time when people actually do reach their boiling point and start to march in the streets because people have been thrown under the bus by this system. But of course, why would the bankers want to change this system? It's a paper system and they make the paper. They have the funny money printing machine and they can make the paper out of whole cloth, out of thin air. And so, why would they want to change this system, Keith? It's really criminal at this point, and those of us that are in the know have turned to physical silver as a way to practice our sovereignty, both financially and in terms of our liberty. We want out of this funny money, paper money system.
And that's what you have to do. The metals market is tiny, I was looking at a presentation yesterday. If we had a 1% increase in demand for the metals, silver and gold, that 1% turns out to, I think it's something in the order of $130 billion move of investment dollars into the sector. That's enough to overwhelm all the physical supply of both gold and silver. It's shocking how little of a change in sentiment. And earlier on in our conversation, we talked about First Majestic stock going up the way it did. It just takes a small change in sentiment for all of a sudden people to want to all of a sudden wake up and say, I need to own physical metal. And if that happens to a degree of only 1%, all of a sudden there's no metal left.
Yeah, and you mentioned the unsustainability of the silver to gold ratio. I think in the paper markets it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 to 1, but in the real world, pulling the stuff out of the ground, you guys are finding what, 9.5, 10 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. And you noted that the human race is using more silver than it ever has in its history. What number would you put as the annual total production supply of silver? Is it well under a billion ounces? Is it somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 million ounces? What would you say?
Yeah, the 2015 numbers aren't out yet, but we saw production in Mexico. I saw one number where it was down 4%. I saw another number that was down 6%. We saw Australia. I saw a number that said Australia was down 14%. The United States became an importer of silver in 2015, which is historic. So the number is somewhere around 800 million ounces of production coming from mines. The consumption is somewhere between 1.1 billion and 1.2 billion. So the difference comes from investment hoards and recycling and so on.
Yeah.
And then we've been in a deficit now for 20 years. You go back and look at how much silver was on the surface of the earth back in the 80s, and there's about 5 billion ounces of silver, and this is in the form of 1,000 ounce commercial bars, so it's actual commercial grade silver, and there's 5 billion ounces. So today it's a billion ounces. So most of that silver is sitting in ETFs, as we know.
Hmm.
So over that 30 odd year period, we've consumed 4 billion ounces of silver, and at that rate, we're just simply not going to have any silver left. And as production is dropping and consumption is going up, the supply demand fundamentals for the metal are extremely good. I think it's the most exciting metal there is on the planet, and that's why I put together a silver company, obviously. But uh, I think we'll see triple digit silver, over the next couple of years for sure. It's my thesis, and I'm pretty certain we're going to see it.
Given the fact that silver and gold have been monetary metals for most of human history, and were so in the United States, going right up through the 60s until they took the silver content out of the coins entirely, don't you find it absolutely amazing that the annual total global silver production times the silver price of $15 or $16 an ounce is less than $15 billion? The total global production of silver in a year is worth less than $15 billion? How does that even compute? That's pure lunacy.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the market cap of Apple is, but I know it's substantially higher than $15 billion. But I think it was close. There was going to be there was talk at one point that it was going to be the first $1 trillion uh, uh, publicly traded company. So I think it's probably north of 500 billion. You probably know, and it's shocking that you can fit all of the silver, into into the size of a company like that. So yeah, it's a tiny, tiny market, and all these companies require silver. I look at silver as a very strategic metal. I don't look at it as I know you said earlier. You look at it as money, but I think it's even more important than money. I think it's very strategic because if silver was taken out of our life today, our life would change dramatically for the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Our homes wouldn't operate, our automobiles, our televisions, our computers, our refrigerators. Nothing would work the way it works today. And as we electrify the planet more and more as we do as a human race, and as more people come to cities we need more silver, and there's no change of that going to occur in our lifetimes, anyways.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the fact that silver is far more than just a monetary metal, it is the fail safe because at the end of the day, the banking cartel cannot take away the true value of silver in industry and for solar panels. And as you mentioned, all those other applications. It's what makes silver such a powerful and important, precious metal. And before we let you go, I want to again talk about your company's First Majestic Silver has been on a tear. This is normally what we see in the return of a bull market is the bigger names move first. What about the juniors? What about First Mining Finance? When can we expect to see those types of companies pick up steam?
Yeah, of course, first, Barrick and Newmont, started to perform, and then it tears down to the mid caps like the First Majestics of the world, and so on. And people, interestingly enough, we had a market cap of $3 billion back in 2011, and the stock was trading at $26 a share. And that year, we produced 7 million ounces of silver. This year we'll do 18 million ounces of silver, and we have a market cap of a third of what it used to be at its peak. So I think there's a ton more room to go. If we see silver get to 18 or 19 or $20, and that's easy to achieve. That can happen in a matter of just days. It would just light First Majestic stock up, and of course, the entire, not just First Majestic, of course, many other stocks. But when it comes to the smaller ones, the juniors now, the ones without revenues and or with interesting projects, they tend to be quite late. So you have to have some patience, and you have to be very careful to buy. If you're going to look at the juniors, make sure their assets are really good, make sure their management teams are really good. And I can't stress that enough. Look at the management teams and see what they've accomplished in the past. And if you're looking at a junior mining stock, there's enough risk buying these things as it is. So just be very careful of that. You're backing good management teams, because that's where it really starts when it comes to creating a business, and not just in mining, right across all industries. On First Mining Finance itself, we've only been public. Yesterday was our 1 year anniversary of being public, and we bought 5 companies in 12 months, and that's a career high for me. I've never bought 5 companies a single year before. Every time we do one of these acquisitions, it's a liquidity event for the target. And then we're using our stock as a currency to buy these publicly traded companies. So, and we're paying fairly substantial premiums for them as well. It's still cheap in my mind. We're still buying great assets for dirt cheap. But when the acquisitions slow down, which we will this year, we've got a couple more transactions we'd like to do this year. We're about a little over 9 million ounces of gold now. We're hoping to get substantially higher than that over the next 6 to 12 months. And but as the company gets more well known, as the Wall Street and Bay Street pick up research on it, and as more people learn about it, I think the stock will progress over time. But it's quite a different animal. We're First Majestic is the second largest silver producer in Mexico. It's a very successful, very a company, a big company, and 4,000 employees and so on. First Mining Finance is a development company. We're acquiring good quality gold assets, primarily in Canada. And the stock at one point in the future, and you can never predict when, will get re-rated, and all of a sudden the stock will change price, and that's when things will start getting exciting.
Yeah, and I'll just let people know again, you got Eric Sprott and Doug Casey, Rick Rule as shareholders, and First Mining Finance is available on the TSX as FF as the ticker, and on the over-the-counter as FFMGF. And you got an awfully good ticker symbol for First Majestic Silver. Tell people what that is.
Yeah, we're very lucky to get that symbol. The symbol's AG on the New York Stock Exchange, and it also trades in Toronto under the symbol FR. And I remember when AG came available, I couldn't believe it, and I immediately grabbed that symbol, and we were very happy to get it. And then, of course, go to the websites as well. There's lots of information on the both websites, firstminingfinance.com and First Majestic Silver, actually just firstmajestic.com. And people can follow me on Twitter as well if they wish to. Just at Keith_Neumeyer. And I don't tweet a lot, but there's some interesting stuff that I do tweet from time to time. So feel free to follow me there if you wish.
All right, cool. Yeah, I bet when you do tweet, you tweet some pretty good stuff like, hey, silver producers, stop letting the cartel whip you around. Let's withhold some silver production and beat these guys at their own game. Yeah, and guys, just to remind you, AG is the symbol for silver on the periodic table, and it's an awfully good stock ticker. So we got Keith Neumeyer, the truth-telling CEO of First Majestic Silver, on the line here, direct from Hong Kong. He's the chairman of First Mining Finance and an all-around good guy. Keith, thanks so much for your time. It was really kind of you to join me, on such a busy time and away from your family, directly from Hong Kong. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks for your time as well.
My pleasure. And guys, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your support at sgtreport.com. Real news 24/7, and I hope you have a great week ahead. God bless.